Hello, fifth grade. I hope that you guys are doing well. I wanted to make a video of the presentation that I was trying to do yesterday in office hours, but I was having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to just start over with that. If you were there, you got a few minutes of this PowerPoint presentation, but not the whole thing. So today you started reading about the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution really changed the way that people in the United States lived and traveled and worked. The Industrial Revolution was a time period, a period in history where we were going from making things by hand to using machines to make things. Things were becoming mechanized. And a lot of people were also moving around the country at this time. We talked a little bit about the roads, and a new road was built in Ohio. When Ohio first became a state, Congress voted to build a road in Ohio. And remember that the roads that existed at this time were not anything like what roads are today. Think more like a path. They were made out of dirt. They had a lot of ruts in them. Travel would have been by horse or by horse and buggy, in some cases covered wagons. But when it rained, they would have been muddy. They would have been dangerous to travel. Places it would have been easy for them to wash out. So having a way to get from place to place in our country as it was expanding was really important. After the road in Ohio was built, or actually when the road in Ohio was built, um, they eventually named it the National Road. And they used stone and tar, and it went from Ohio to Illinois. Now, using stone and tar made it a little bit more like our roads today, made it a little bit more permanent. It was still pretty bumpy, but it wasn't as easy to be washed out, so it did make travel easier. By 1860, there was more than 88,000 miles of road. And of course, roads were beneficial for travel. It made it easier to get from place to place and for carrying goods. Because as people expanded where they lived in the United States, they needed to be able to get food, they needed to be able to get furniture, durable goods. Lumber was an important product because a lot of them were building their own homes. So these roads were very important to the development of the United States. And here we have a picture where we can see what the roads looked like. We can see that it is a wide swath of road, but that it doesn't look very flat. It looks like it has a lot of bumps and a lot of ruts in it, and so that did make travel difficult. Even with these new roads that were being built, they were still bumpy and nothing like the roads that we have today. So in addition to building roads, this was also the time in American history where canals were being built. And a canal is a man-made waterway. So they found that boats and barges, a barge is a large flat boat, could carry large loads of supplies. And it was often easier to travel to ship goods by waterway instead of by roads. One of the most important and first canals that was built in New York was the Erie Canal, and this was an important canal. It was called the Grand Canal, and it was built by DeWitt Clinton, who was the governor of New York at that time. And at first, it earned itself the nickname Clinton's Ditch because people weren't sure if it was actually going to work. An undertaking of this, building 363 miles of canal, was a huge undertaking, and people kind of joked around and called it Clinton's Ditch because they weren't sure it was going to work. But it did. Over 3,000 immigrants, especially Irish immigrants, came for jobs in the building of the canal, because this was a time where there was a lot of immigration, a lot of people coming into the United States at this time. And these immigrants that worked on the canal were paid 80 cents a day, and they were also given meals and housings. And that was actually a lot of money at this time. That was 3 times the amount of money that they could earn in Ireland at this time. So earning that 80 cents a day was actually a good paying job, and especially considering that it had meals and housing as well. Now, it took 8 years to build, and it set off a canal building boom. So the Erie Canal was one of the first canals to be built, and there were several others that were built in the 1830s at this time. Pennsylvania developed a system of canals that connected different parts of Pennsylvania, as well as connecting it to Ohio and some of the other states in the area. Now, I did want to go in and show you a video, and I'm going to stop and talk about it in certain places. So we should be able to see this little video that takes us on a virtual tour of the Erie Canal. So I'm going to start playing it, but I will pause it to talk and tell you a little bit about what we're seeing. So this is the Erie Canal that you're seeing, and there is a bike trail that goes all along the Erie Canal now. We can see that it's wide, that it still has barges and boats that go on. And this right here that we were seeing pictures of is the Erie Canal Village. It just went by, but we can see an example of a barge right here. This is an example of a lock, and we'll get another example of that in a minute. All right, right here, this is the lock system, which is on the Erie Canal, and it's one of the oldest lock systems in the United States. What we're seeing here are these large doors, metal doors, that are opening up to let a boat out. And what would have happened before this, the water would have been up to the top where you can see these marks. Because upstream, the river was much higher. The boat goes into these locks, and there are doors like this behind it and in front of it. While the boat is in the lock, they either let water out or let water in to raise the level of the boat. So in this case, it looks like a boat was about to leave the lock, and so they have lowered the water level probably a good 15 to 20 feet. So the boat would have started out way up here, and they let the water out, and the boat just slowly lowered with the water level. And as they open these doors back up, the boat would be able to continue sailing on the canal. Some beautiful pictures of the Erie Canal. Here we can see a lift bridge, and this is a bridge. Over here we see a tower, and this bridge would go up and down so that people can still drive over it. But right now the bridge has lifted up, and the boat can go underneath it. So if you'll see right over here where this car is, it looks like the car would drive right into a wall right here. When the boat is finished going under this bridge, then this tower over here, someone's in here working, they will lower this bridge back down to the water level, and this car will be able to just drive right over. They have many different styles of bridges on the Erie Canal, and this is one of them called a lift bridge. Again, I mentioned there's a bike trail that you can ride along the Erie Canal, and places where you can even kayak. This bookshop right here is in Spencerport, New York, and I actually was there last summer. it is right down the street from a very cool lift bridge, one that opens in the middle, if I remember correctly. So there's lots of little towns that also sprung up around the canal, and because the canal was there, it made those towns become more populated. And this shows us a good example. Where they're riding their bike is where the towpath would have been. So we talked about this a little bit in office hours. So the boat would have been in the water, and this is before we had even steamboats, before we had boats that were powered by engines. So they were powered by donkeys. They were pulled by mules. So the animals would be harnessed and they would be over here on the towpath. The boat would be in the water, and they would pull the boat along from place to place. When the animals needed a break, they would give them a break, and they would probably swap out for some new donkeys or mules, and they would continue moving goods from place to place this way. This is a great view of the canal. And here we can see the 368 or 63 miles that it goes through in New York. All right. And when they moved to the Erie Canal, they were able to move goods so much quicker and so much cheaper. When shipping goods left the city of New York City in New York, it would have taken $100 a ton to travel through the roads, getting all the way across the state to Buffalo in New York. But when they used the Erie Canal, when that was open, it cost them less than $10 a ton. So it not only made it cheaper to move goods from place to place, but it also made it easier and faster. All right. And the age of the canal did not last for that long, though, because before you know it, technology, remember I said we were in the Industrial Revolution and we were moving from making things by hand to making things that was mechanized. And so before we knew it, steamboats and railroads were taking over. That will be the next section that we will talk about in this chapter. I hope you enjoyed that little part about the Erie Canal. It's a great place if you ever have a chance to visit it. Have a great day.